going to keep on keeping on with user story service unit testing. All right, so we finished the get feature user stories and create user story functions. Let's go ahead and look at get user story status by ID. Okay. All right, so if we look, we are first finding a user story by its ID, and we are making sure the tasks associated with it come back. Then we're getting the task count. We're filtering to see what tasks are completed, and we are getting the completed task length, and then we are returning the status of the completed task length out of the task count. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to say it, and then we are going to do get user story status by ID, and then it's going to say returns the number of completed tasks out of the total number of tasks for a given user story ID. All right, so now let's write some tests for it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to well, I actually am a little bit confused by my code now, because we have this method here, get user story by ID, where we're doing just this. So I think what I'm going to do then is I'm going to move this method up. We're going to do a little bit of refactoring, and then we're going to say const user story equals await this dot get user story by ID, and then pass in the ID. All right, so now instead of testing this one right here, I'm going to comment that out for now. I'm going to test just the get user story ID by ID first. All right, and then we can go ahead and move on to testing getting the status by ID. All right, so it get user story by ID returns a user story from an inputted user story ID. All right, so we're going to make an asynchronous function here, and 1 second, my dog is scratching at the door, so let me let him in. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to define our input and our output. So our input is going to be an ID, so we want to say const ID equals, let's just say 1, okay? And then we're going to have our output, so we're going to say const user story, and then that is going to be as a user story. All right, so we're going to have ID is going to be 1, we're going to have name is going to be user story 1, and we're going to have description is going to be user story 1 description, and then we have the relations tasks, so we're going to make the tasks array in here, and then let's just add a task. So let's do ID 1, name task 1, and status to do. All right, and we're just gonna say that that is what we have, okay? So now we are going to say just spy on, because we want to spy on the mock user stories repository. We want to spy on the find one method, and we want to mock the return value. We want the return value to be user story. Okay, so then we can say const result is going to be equal to await service dot get user story by ID, and then we'll pass in the ID, and we expect that result to equal the user story. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this test. Perfect. All right, so what else do we expect? We expect that the mock user story repository dot find one has been called, and we expect that the mock user story repository dot find one has been called with, and then we can go and grab this and paste it in. All right, and so that is going to be testing our get user story by ID function. All right, and now in our next one, okay, so let's go ahead and comment this back in. In our next one, we're going to use that function to get the user story, okay, and then we're going to kind of compile the user story from there, or the user story status from there. All right, so we want to pass in an ID. Okay, so the ID that we're going to pass in is 1. Okay, and then we are going to get a user story back. Okay, so we want to say const user story. I'm going to go up to here and I'm going to steal it. Okay, but I'm going to add a few more tasks to it. Okay, so task 1, task 2, we're going to say in progress. Then we're going to have task 3 is going to be done. And then let's do task 4. Let's do done. And let's do task 5. Sure, to do. Okay, so now we have our tasks. Okay, so we shouldn't have to mock out these because we're going to return the user story and then it's going to do this for us, right? Because this is the section of code that we're really testing here, okay? So then we are going to spy on this find one here, okay? So we are going to say just.spy on mock user stories repository. We're going to spy on find one, and we are going to mock the return value, and it's going to be user story, okay? Because it's going to call this get user story by ID, which then calls this find one method. So we're going to mock it, and we're going to say we're just going to return this user story up here that we wrote out, okay? Then it's going to use that user story to do all of this compilation, and it's going to return this, okay? So now we can say const result is going to be await service dot get user story by ID. We're going to pass in the ID, and we're going to say that we expect the result to equal, and then let's give this a try, right? So completed task length out of task count. So we have 5 tasks, and we have 2 that are done. So we expect that this is going to be a string that's going to say 2 out of 5. Okay? So let's go ahead and run the test suite and see what happens. And we passed, okay? So that is very exciting. Okay. And we could probably do some different edge cases too here, where we have like none and make sure it still works and stuff like that. I feel pretty good with this, but just know that there's always better testing that you can do. Okay, so we then expect that mock user stories repository.find1 to have been called. And then we expect that mock user story repository.find1 to have been called with, and then let's go and pull this up here. All right, and then we should be able to rerun our tests. Perfect. All right, so that is testing the get user story status by ID. So we now tested get user story by ID and get user story status by ID. Perfect. So you can minimize this. All right, the next one that we're working on is update user story. All right, so this one is definitely going to be a little bit more involved because we're going to have to do a few different edge cases. So I'm going to look at delete user story real quick, and that's also going to be a little bit more involved. So I think we're going to end this video here, and then we will do another video on update user story and then another one on delete user story. All right, I will see you in the next one.